Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA fined me $39,999 for clearing snow in front of my property during snowstorm. Big regrets. TLDR. In summary, after a couple of tough winters we started having trouble with our HOA as they expressly forbid us from plowing our driveways and the roads around us, advising us of snowmobiles or a good set of walking boots. I continued to plow the roads for our own safety and necessity but was soon punished for it with a hefty stack of fines and code violations as reported by the HOA sometime later. We lost the initial legal battle but quickly found support for our cause on social media with many locals also complaining about the HOA. Together we managed to get our verdict overturned and the HOA was disbanded. I'm going to start by saying I live in a small town that gets a lot of snow over winter, making already narrow and dangerous rural roads damn near impossible to get through, and that's if you're lucky. I thought I was being a good Samaritan, a good neighbor, by plowing some of the snow away, although most of it was on my own land just so my wife and I could get our cars out without slipping into a ditch or tree. We went to a public meeting last winter to ask if they could send someone to deal with the snow quickly piling up and were met dismissively with suggestions to rent a snowmobile during the harder months or walk if absolutely necessary. I saw no reason to go to such extremes when I knew I could manage it by myself. It's not like we could afford to stay at home over the winter and our jobs weren't so close that we had the luxury of walking to them from way out here in the sticks. The work was hard and the snow was heavy, but I managed to keep at least one small portion of the driveway and roads cleared to allow us to reach the nearby town and rest of the outside world. One day, after spending hours clearing the drive, I left with the car to pick up my son from town, finding the road ahead blocked by someone working for the HOA. I stopped to ask what was going on and they said they were told to install a road bump on our land. It made it hard to access my house now by road and damn near impossible for my son with his disability. As soon as I came back I spent the evening digging the thing back up. The next morning I called up a representative of the HOA to give them a piece of my mind. What followed 2 weeks later was a letter outlining that this policy would stay and cars found on closed roads would be subject to further fines. No apology was given for the trouble or stress the incident caused our family. With no clear desire or interest in meeting us halfway or accommodating to our family's needs, I decided to keep clearing the high tides of snow from the road, and we continued to use the road in our daily lives, unaware of what was coming next. Despite our protests, the HOA continued to insist on the use of snowmobiles for transport in favor of our usual vehicles in the winter months, firmly stating that the roads should remain snowed over even on private property, listing off various reasons which I didn't really care to believe. I just thought they were doing it because they were stubborn and didn't like us much after the commotion we had tried to raise earlier. It was early February when the snow began to melt, but that's not where our problem stopped. A thick envelope arrived hand-delivered from an express courier, quickly ripping it open to reveal a stack of bills and a strongly worded letter that spanned 2 whole pages. In summary, the HOA had been recording the complaints we had made and cited us with a number of violations, with a hefty fine to back it up which they assured us was legally binding. The violations ranged from the weird to ridiculous: harassment of HOA personnel, plowing roads without authorization, and use of closed roads without permit. From day one I spent long hours on calls to their representatives to try and get the fines removed or at least reduced due to what seemed like an unfair rule on their part, seeing as they somehow felt they had the sole rights to the roads to and from my house, able to block me in or out of it at their leisure. They did not take kindly to this criticism, however, and despite negotiations starting calm, their inadequacies and inability to cooperate or show the slightest hints of sympathy or empathy made me mad, as if they did not understand what the whole deal was. When I refused to meet their demands, I was approached by police officers the next evening telling me that the fines were legal and had to be paid soon. With little options left to me, I called a lawyer and decided to file charges against the HOA, hoping that a jury would understand my situation and overrule them. Days passed into weeks as the trial continued. The fees were becoming too much, but still a fraction of what had been demanded of me. And then, on that final and fated day, I found myself fall deeply into disappointment and despair. The HOA had hired a team of expert lawyers and hounded us through most of the trial, a classic David and Goliath scenario, except this time Goliath won. The jury and judge agreed to side with HOA and I was ordered to pay total fees of $41,500 or face time in jail. I had no fight left to give at that point and fell into a long depression. A second mortgage on the house got me the money for the fees and I tried not to do anything to upset them further, keeping my car off the road for the while. My son was homeschooled, unable to walk to catch a bus, and my wife was put on leave until it was resolved. I even contemplated quitting my job, now unable to leave my house. My wife, however, wasn't done with the fight. She insisted that it was too soon to just roll over and that we had suffered enough. Although I hadn't much hope at the time, we took our story public and soon found ourselves overwhelmed with support from other homeowners, both from the local towns and other states with their own troubles with local housing authority. Through what we can only call a miracle, the debt we had ended up in was paid off after a surge of generous donations that only brought more attention to our cause. Once it was picked up by the news, it has gone completely viral, with many angry voices demanding for retrial. As the first snow of a new winter began, the HOA was found guilty of misconduct and abuse of power, and the judge ordered it to be disbanded after clearing us off all charges. I went back to plowing my own roads again and I could not be happier. We won. The next story is titled, How I Got a Store Manager Fired for Selling My Property to a Karen Mom. I'm 26, male, and am both autistic and have severe PTSD from some childhood trauma caused by both of my parents that I really don't want to get into. I'm on a few different medications for depression and migraines and have to live in Section 8 housing that I just moved into a few months ago after being on the waiting list for years. I don't like being touched or loud noises. And I certainly don't like seeing anyone take my stuff. When I moved to this city for the Section 8 housing, I'd been gifted a brand new Razor kick scooter by a friend to get around my new area with. And I love it. It's black and made a bit sturdier than typical ones for an adult to ride and has bigger wheels. It also isn't sold in the local stores, but they have similar looking ones in the bike department. And obviously I don't just leave it outside when I go into a store. I fold it up and put it in my cart while shopping. I look kinda twitchy, so most people leave me alone. And I'm just fine with that. But touch me without consent or take my stuff and be ready for a massive freakout. I went down the canned food aisle and started browsing the chunky soup. When I picked what I'd wanted and put the cans in the cart, I noticed my scooter was gone. And there was a woman with a kid fast walking away while carrying it. I shouted after them to return my scooter. But they ignored me, so I abandoned my cart to give chase. When I caught up to the lady and the kid, I tried to take my scooter back and the kid screamed so loud my eardrums felt like they were gonna pop. And the Karen mom shoved down while yelling something I didn't hear because my ears were ringing and my brain just stopped working for a moment. A manager noticed the commotion and came to see what the trouble was. I didn't even get a chance to speak when the Karen mom started calling me a creep and was demanding I be thrown out. I kept trying to explain what really happened, but the Karen just kept yelling over me. We were separated and I was made to sit in an office. The manager approached me and I asked him where my scooter was, and he admonished me and said it was sold to the Karen, and I shouldn't have tried to take it from the kid when they were just trying to buy it from the store. Then he pointed out he had to give the Karen a discount just because of the situation. I understandably freaked out and told him that the Karen had taken my scooter that I came into the store with. And it wasn't sold there. The manager just looked confused and I nearly broke down. Then I pulled my phone out and showed him a picture a friend had taken of me with the scooter right after I'd gotten it. The next thing I knew, he was running out of the room. And when he finally came back, he said that the Karen was long gone. I pulled out my phone back out and started frantically calling the police. The manager actually tried to stop me by putting his hand over my phone, and I freaked out from him touching me. He backed off because I'd nearly kicked him and was panicking and saying he'd buy me another scooter from the store. I told him that my scooter was expensive and didn't come from their store. And I wanted mine back. Well, it turned out I had managed to dial 911 because the police were already listening in on the line and the operator was trying to get my attention. I just told them to send someone over because my property had been stolen. I had to wait for another hour at least while police showed up and then went through the CCTV footage. It clearly showed me entering the store with the scooter, and showed the Karen and her crotch goblin taking it from my cart. And the mess that followed when I tried to get it back. I wanted my scooter back and police had to find the Karen from the camera footage of the parking lot. They found her address by running her plate number they got from the camera footage, and I got to ride in the back of a police car while we went to her apartment. The officer knocked on her door and I didn't hear the situation because I was still sitting in the back of the car with the windows closed. But the Karen mom looked really angry and eventually brought out the scooter after some back and forth. She practically had to wring it out of her kid's hands. I got let out of the car and they asked me if I wanted to press charges for assault because the mother had shoved me. She looked ghost white when I said I did want that. But the Karen started crying and begging me. She said that she honestly thought it was something the store was selling, and it was her kid's birthday. I yelled that didn't excuse her stealing from someone else's cart, let alone from a legally disabled man. Her kid was also loudly crying and my ears were hurting again. So I said I wouldn't press charges on her if she didn't come near me or my stuff again. But I wanted something done about the manager at the store for letting this happen. And I was ready to ride my scooter all the way back there. But the police convinced me that it'd be better if I just went home and calmed down. I later learned on my next visit to the store a couple days later that manager was fired over what happened because he already had a few complaints against him and didn't bother to check that the scooter wasn't one of theirs. And the store gave the Karen and her kid a replacement Razor scooter that they had in stock because she'd already paid for one. But she was also banned for 6 months from the store for shoving me and stealing my property. I was also given a $50 gift card for some free groceries since I wasn't able to buy anything the day that mess happened. Now every time I go into that store a few of the employees know me by name. And one actually told a random kid to leave me alone when he asked about my scooter. I certainly keep a better eye at now too. I've also since added a name tag on the underside of the scooter with my full name on it just in case this happens again. The next story is entitled Child Destroys My Property and Threatens to Evict Me with Entitled Mother. For context, my childhood was spent growing up in Dubai in a villa compound, which is basically like a mini gated community of 16-odd villa homes that each have a private back garden that then converges in a large, shared space with a pool, social area, foliage, etc. Now as a result of this, everyone got to know their neighbors very well due to the shared social space, and as most homes had kids, we'd all play together in the pool. Now there was a particular family with 2 very entitled children who we shall call Anna and Francis, not actual names, who must have been about 9. These little turds were well known for causing trouble in the community and generally being extremely entitled. One story that sticks out most to me is the following, which I hope you enjoy. One afternoon, my younger brother runs into our house having been playing in a group with some other kids and Anna and Francis, very frustrated. He announces to me that Anna and Francis are currently in our private back garden ripping the heads off of our flowers. I of course go outside to find the 2 gremlins, ripping apart plants and kicking our hedges in whilst being supervised by their nanny, who spoke very little English. Me. What do you think you're doing? Anna. Duck you, we can do what we want. Me. Stop that and get out of our garden. The nanny just stood there with a vacant expression on her face, so I walk up to her, as the kids continue to destroy our garden. Me. Excuse me, aren't you going to do something? Nanny. No, they do what they want till dinner. Me. This is our garden, can you make them leave please? This time no response besides vacant blinking. So naturally, my younger brother and I turn to the gremlins and very firmly tell them, stop and get out now, and start to usher them towards the exit. This is when Anna drops some big threats. Anna. My mother owns this whole compound, we own your house, a-hole. They had colorful language for children their age. Me. She really doesn't, now get out. Anna. We own your house, we can break anything we want, we can do anything you want. We'll get you kicked out. At this point, we've pushed them out, followed meekly by their nanny, and locked the garden gate. On the other side they hurl obscenities and eventually run off to find their entitled mother. I'm told by my own mum that she had a heated conversation with the M, who in fact did not own the compound, nor our house, but was very displeased that her children's fun was interrupted by my brother and I. Apparently we have no right to upset or interfere in matters involving her children, and we would do well to keep our business to ourselves or the landlord would be called. Suffice to say my mum was not having any of it and asked politely that her children don't invite themselves into our garden and don't destroy our property, which was in fact grounds to involve the landlord. The M left in a huff and we didn't hear from them for a couple of weeks, thankfully. But it wouldn't be long before we crossed paths with their bullshit again. If you enjoyed this one, I have plenty more tales from the compound, involving entitled parents and kids. As I'm sure you've guessed, Dubai does tend to have some rather entitled people in it. Although I did love my time there. The last story is titled, Entitled Child Punches My Head, Shoots Paintballs into My Property, whilst entitled Father Tells Me Off and Revs His Ferrari at 5 a.m. Hello again and welcome back to Tales from the Compound. The support you guys are giving this series is phenomenal and I love being able to share with you some of my stories of the entitled people I grew up with. Today I'm not going to be talking about Anna, Francis and their entitled mother. Instead it's time to talk about another family, my next door neighbors, more specifically an entitled father, EF, and his 10-year-old son, who we'll call Simon. I honestly chose not to interact with my neighbors as little as possible, so this post is more a collection of mini stories of them that I've compiled to paint you guys a full picture of their entitledness. I grew up next to a mosque, and some might find the muezzin singing a call to prayer every morning and every night through a loudspeaker to be bothersome, or disturbing to their sleep pattern. I however quite enjoyed listening to it, but what I didn't enjoy listening to was my neighbor, entitled father revving his black Ferraris engine, first thing in the morning and last thing before night. Entitled father rarely drove his gorgeous black Ferrari, but in order to keep the engine turning over and stop sand settling inside it, every day and night without fail he'd rev the engine as loud as he could for 10 minutes with a fat cigar hanging from his mouth. He would also have a very young, assumably very poor teenager cycle over every single evening and clean the car from top to bottom over the course of an hour, even when EF was away on business. EF would also have his maids, nannies set up his entire back garden social area with pillows, candles, trays of cigars and flowers before it was even light outside, and we quite literally never saw him use it. But one person we did see use that back garden was Simon. Because Simon had a paintball gun, and Simon loved to fire off rounds into other people's property, and Simon loved to make his nannies clean up the paintball mess in his own garden as he cackled maniacally. But the paintballs aren't the worst memory of Simon. On his 9th birthday, Simon had a WWE party to which I was invited, and this kid was truly a fanatic. His bouncy castle was WWE themed. The decorations and cake all depicted John Cena and The Undertaker, and his WWE toys littered his garden. About 40 kids were in attendance, the parents smoked and drank whilst the nannies and maids catered for the children. I only popped round for cake as my own parents suggested it'd be polite and they knew I'd rather smell what the Rock's cooking, than spend longer than 10 minutes with Simon. I sort of got my wish, because no sooner than I'd arrived, I was invited to enter the bouncy house for a WWE wrestling match with the birthday boy. He'd beaten every other boy at this party and was keen for a new challenger, and since I was a year older than him, he was certain my defeat would win him the belt. So I entered the ring, hoping there'd be some cake for me at the end of it. This was when I discovered that Simon had no idea what wrestling was, as he ran at me and began to punch my head with the ferocity of a feral raccoon. Punch after punch, kick after kick connected with my head and groin for all of 5 seconds before I pushed him off, and he stumbled back and tripped over his own feet on the uneven bouncy surface. This resulted in him bashing his glasses and face on the floor, and into his nose, eye area where it looked like it was bruising. Of course he burst into tears and ran to entitled father, who he told I'd punched him in the face and tried to kick in his glasses whilst he was down, when he was simply bouncing on the bouncy castle. I was rightfully so, berated by entitled father for my violent tendencies and the fact I'd ruined his son's birthday and possibly his face and that I should leave at once. Without cake. Considering my own parents weren't present, I didn't know any of the kids there, and I'd been at the party for maybe 2 minutes tops, I saw no point in debating and welcomed the opportunity to return to my home for some Minecraft. Thanks for sticking around for another longer Tales from the Compound. Hope you enjoyed hearing about some different characters and as always let me know if you want to hear more. Thank you for listening.